welcome. My name is Nicole Ryle, and I'm the Director of Development and Public Programs here at the California Institute for Human Science. And I'm really excited today to announce our 2023 book series. This is our second edition. And we are excited today to welcome Richard D. Marks and discuss his book, Expect Great Things to Happen. And yeah, throughout this year, we're going to be highlighting local and global authors who have similar missions and books published that align with CIHS's mission of mind, body, spirit education. So the Enlighten division of CIHS is our public programs division, where we are expanding our certificate offerings as well as continuing education and public offerings like the one here today. So I'd like to thank you all for being here. And now I will turn it over to CIHS President, Dr. Thomas Brophy.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Welcome to this very special live event at California Institute for Human Science, part of our 2023 book series. I'm delighted to be able to introduce today's presenters, my two friends who are very much connected with CIHS's mission and philosophy of CIHS's founder, Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama. And today's topic, conscious business leadership, is a very timely and exciting topic for us. Richard Marks is a veteran of the U.S. Army and a veteran of many years of private sector corporate leadership at all levels. And his book, new book, is Expect Great Things to Happen: 5 Core Principles of Highly Effective Business Professionals. Anne-Marie Cushing is a visionary architect, educator, and advocate for health reform. She's an advisor to national and international health organizations, providing leadership and strategic envisioning of health reform. She served as co-chair of the executive committee board of the famous and extraordinary New York Open Center. Most fortunately for us at CIHS, Anne-Marie is a trustee of the California Institute for Human Science. So now I'll pass it back to Nicole for this very exciting event and interview.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Thomas. Yes, I just wanted to also let you know that there will be time for Q&A in about an hour or whenever we wrap up our conversation. And these public programs are also made available by your donation. So this very convenient text code is here on my screen. If you feel so inclined, we'd be very honored and grateful for your donation to keep public programs like these running. So again, thank you for being here, and let's dive in today. Welcome, Anne-Marie, and welcome, Richard. We're so excited to dive into this conversation and have you both here. So let's begin.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, or where everyone is in the world. Hello. We're so happy, and thank you, Thomas and Nicole, for those wonderful introductions. We're so delighted to have Richard with us and be part of our program today. And I just absolutely loved this book. I don't know if you can see it because you're probably not, I think you put it up on the screen, perhaps. Did you put book cover on? Oh, there it is. Yes, on the screen. And we're just happy to know that you've put together this wonderful, comprehensive book that enables, or manual really, that enables people to really understand and dive really deep into themselves. Because as you know, when you have a better understanding of who you are personally, you're more effective with everything that you do. And that's pretty much what I found the book to be overall. And you talk about the 5 principles, which we'll go into as well. But what I loved about it is that you were able to, kind of understand through your journey and your own personal journey, which I felt was another very big highlight about the book. It was focused a lot on your own specific journey, is that you were able to give a comprehensive sort of understanding of how you kind of connect with people and their passions. and by showing all the various different principles and then becoming better communicators and listeners and motivators. But this wasn't just for business, it's all aspects of life, which is great. And it, of course, affects also your own life in general to have a better life. So maybe, Richard, you can give us a little bit of a background and kind of introduce the audience about your own personal journey and how that brought forward these 5 principles. And I always ask people, why do you choose this title, for instance, expect great things to happen? And maybe you can give us a sort of overall arc of what your journey was to come to writing this book.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Anne Marie, and of course, Thomas and Nicole for the opportunity to be in front of you folks today. And I like to, again, thank all of our viewers as well for this opportunity as well. Well, Anne Marie, earlier you mentioned a manual, and that's a very interesting statement because one of my goals of this book was to provide a basic, simplistic, tangible blueprint, if you will, on how to navigate through life complexities. And through my experience, the human experience, we have more in common than not. And I just felt as though that I could be completely transparent in this book. And the hope was to hope to help people identify themselves in some of the stories that I was sharing, most definitely relatable stories, and then provide these 5 principles, if you will, as a way to self-navigate out of their own complexities of life that we all have to experience at some point in time. And that's sort of a universal principle. So whether we are transparent about what we are experiencing or going through or not, we're still have to deal with it. And so my goal is to be transparent, not to a fault, but transparent in a way where people can, like, I get it, I understand it, and this may not have to be as difficult perhaps as I imagine it to be. It's challenging by all means, but I've learned that one person can do what another one has done. So in essence, that was one of the goals and the purpose of the book, i.e. the manual, is to make it very simplistic, if you will. My story, again, I was raised in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and went to high school there, even went to junior college there. And I go into more detail in the book. And I fathered early, so I left college and joined the U.S. Army. And even before that, and please forgive me for bouncing around, I was raised by my grandparents. And my mom was often in my life, and I didn't get to know my dad until late adolescence, but I always had yearned for him to be a part of my life. And when I finally got to meet this gentleman, just a phenomenal human being, and we just connected and bonded immediately. And time just sort of was made up, if you will, for the time that I yearned for and lost. And I share that because my dad also he had his own life, if you will, and he had another family, and some of the things that he was involved in or doing, if you will, nothing negative or overly negative, if you will, but they were not necessarily great characteristics I wanted to mimic. But at the same time, he's my dad, and I realized that if I wanted to have a relationship with him, I could either be frustrated, upset. I can't force change on anyone. So I decided to just embrace him for who he was. And I learned at that early age what we know now to be as unconditional love. I just loved my dad, and I knew that he loved me. And that helped me in such a amazing way, is to continue that in all of the relationships that I have. We all have great characteristics about us, and we all have areas of opportunities, as I would like to say. And that, from my experience, seems to be a universal part of the human experience. And so I've just learned to love unconditionally, if you will. And and that helped me as I began to transition into the military. And the military was a really interesting experience. It's not what I wanted to do by all means, but I felt as though that's what I needed to do to provide for my family, and also to get a jump start on my career. But I immediately realized that the military, where it did offer me a gateway into a profession and to be a provider, it wasn't what I wanted to do, and that was almost identified immediately. But I also learned a lot in terms of some discipline, which is one of the five principles of the book. I really learned discipline there, what to do, what not to do, and continue to navigate into a career of sales. I spent 30 years in sales, and even in that, I learned a lot as well about myself. And I think there in the arena of sales, because it's almost like an independent sport, if you will, even though you're connected to a larger group in terms of the companies in which you're representing. But you have to go out there and sell and put yourself sort of in harm's way and the rejection, and you celebrate the victories as well. But that was a very interesting career path for me, but I learned a lot about me in terms of resiliency and tenacity and staying focused, staying disciplined, and having this high level of self-awareness, which really helped me, if you will, to be successful not only as an individual contributor when I was selling in the corporate world, but also it magnified itself when I became a leader in corporate America. And that's where I spend most of my time developing other folks in the professional arena of sales, as well as helping the organizations become better holistically in terms of really focusing on the individual. I realized that if I wasn't mentally, physically healthy, if you will, to go out there and take on the challenges of life, if you will, in the arena of sales, if you will, or business. Um, but if I couldn't take care of myself, there was going to be some additional challenges. So I almost learned out of default to focus on enhancing these skill sets. And I found that there are some common denominators among business professionals and also business athletes when I began to do the research for my book. And I came up with these five core principles. They are synonymous among business athletes or athletes. And athletes usually are held to a high standard. They are professionals. They receive all of these accolades for all of the effort and energy that they put into on the field or in the ring or whatever sport that they are in. But as business professionals, we also exude these same core principles, if you will, but often we don't always hear the fanfare or get the accolades, if you will, as athletes. But the tenacity and focus, what it takes to be an elite business professional, if you will, are the same subset of principles. So part of the book was to bridge those two things together and to help people intentionally nurture these five core principles, if you will, to help them be the best version of themselves.
Yeah, I found that to be very interesting because you had many different alternative ways too. It's not just a one set course aspect, you know, of to do book. It was meant seeing it from a very overall holistic whole way. And you express this on many accounts, stories that lead. Can you give us a story of an individual perhaps that you were working with? Without, of course, any names, but that was looking to enhance their abilities to be their best self.
Yes, having the opportunity to be a leader in corporate America, there were many situations to really, build that relationship and build that rapport with your team. I learned early as a leader in corporate America, the way that I get things done, if you will, is getting things done through other people.
Hmm.
And so I really had to humble myself and learn that very quickly. In many cases, there were several of my people that were more I was in the technology industry. And in many cases, they knew a lot more about the technology than I do, but I was their boss. However, I needed them and they needed me collectively. And so there were situations where folks would be dealing even with their personal lives. Um, and and they would bring that into the office. And so that reminds me actually of several stories in comparison, if you will, where part of the component of what I talk about is emotional intelligence. And in that components of emotional intelligence, there's a skill set that we know as social awareness. Social awareness is understanding the emotional makeup of other people, treating people according to their emotional reactions, showing empathy. And so employees will come into my office or come into the office, and I would give them the proper greeting, good morning. And I could just literally see that there was something troubling that person. And I realized that, they are hurting, suffering. I'm not sure what it was, but I can see that there was a challenge there. So I asked them a very simplistic question. And that question was, how are you today? And just by asking that question, and I meant that in a very sincere way, they felt, and this is their feedback, that I cared about them in that moment, not the job, not the task, just caring about them as an individual. And because I demonstrated that olive branch, if you will, to open up a conversation to say, hey, if you can talk about this if you want to. It's totally up to you. You can choose to or not. But because I ask, they were very appreciative. And they said, Richard, yes, I'm going through some things. I'm going through some personal stuff right now. I'd rather not share at this very moment. However, I may bring it up to you later if it becomes more of a challenge for me. And that person continued to be a top producer, continue to be engaged, continue to be focused. As a matter of fact, I've learned by showing empathy with folks, particularly folks that we are leading, when we demonstrate those characteristics of empathy, that is actually the secret where people feeling valued, respected, and appreciated. And they will literally go above and beyond. You don't have to worry about micromanaging at that particular point. I mean, you can't be completely blind. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying be irresponsible as a leader, which you always check in on our people. But what I found that when people show or know that you care as a leader, they typically will go above and beyond. And I was told as a young man, when I was in corporate America, or actually when I was in the military, it was a really interesting comment. And that comment was, keep your personal life at home when you come into the office. I understand that to a degree, right? I understand what that meant. But the last time I checked, Anne Marie, I am one person. Right. So if I have to split myself into to do these subcategories or sort of fake it, that actually becomes distraction for me. It allows me not to focus. Now, it doesn't mean I come to work and just start to air all of the things that are going on with me, but I also understand that people are hurting. People need a way to communicate. And last time I checked, we often spend more time with the people that we work with sometimes than the people that we live with at home, or there's a fair amount of that. And I've had one leader to tell me this, but often leaders do not say this. Well, leave your professional life at work when you go home. Often we're taking our professional life, bringing it home, and we're absorbed, whether it's mentally or physically, or working on tasks. And so I just learned that we are a person, we're whole beings, if you will. And so if something was troubling someone, whether it's personal or professional, I want them to let them know that they could talk to me if they choose to. And if I can provide some guidance or directions or provide some resources, then I would do that as well. And what I end up doing is creating such a camaraderie, such a team, such a collaboration environment, is that this team and we will go above and beyond for one another. We were there to support each other, actually helped us become what we call a high performance team.
Yeah, beautiful. Because I think there's studies that have been done, which particularly the younger generation that are moving into the workforce, let's say, are looking at that the most important things that they consider of value is their freedom and more time to do whatever they want to do, and have that ability, which of course we're now leading into a 4-day work week too in the world. And they think that more productivity will come from that because people have either more time with family members or at home, and to be able to have their own personal value rather than put ambition, ranking, money as the top priority, which was very, very prevalent, let's say in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and such. And that's been a big shift. Have you seen these shifts happening in the workforce, in the field? And how do leaders, who deal with all that too?
Yes, I have seen the shift. Well, I guess in essence, there could be about 5 different generations in the workforce right now, and
Mhm,
so I think acknowledging that is number one. Number two is that I really think that we need to extract that negative verbiage in which we use to describe one another and our differences. That's
mhm,
a concern for me. I'm on a quest to have changed that verbiage. We also have to be careful in terms of what we're listening to, because that's influencing perhaps our behavior and some of our verbiage as well. And there are some clients I work with here on the West Coast where they have trouble, if you will, retaining some of the folks that are just entering the workforce for the first time. They're graduating college into the workforce, and
mhm,
they had a high attrition rate, almost 40% with that group. And that group needed to be trained by the traditionalists, in some cases the baby boomers who were exiting out of the business. And that particular group or groups were reluctant initially to train those folks because the new group that was entering the workforce, again, a little more technology savvy, has a few, the value of work is slightly different, was more or less that work-life balance, if you will, as you described.
mhm,
And because the traditionalists in this case would say, hey, these young folks, they don't want to work, they're not committed,
mhm,
and that is not the case at all whatsoever. It's just a
mhm,
different way of doing things.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I encourage those folks, and I encourage HR professionals and leaders, is to have conversations with your folks. Find out what's important to them. Do not
mhm,
assume. And I think we're doing a lot of assumptions and or hearsay. Well, this group doesn't want to work. Well, have a conversation with them. Find out how they work. Find out what
mhm,
they value, what's important to them. And that's
mhm,
one of the things that we should be doing as leaders anyway, is building that level of rapport with our folks. I had a group of leaders that was putting together an incentive program for their employees. It was
mhm,
about 20 of these folks, and I was all leaders, all managers from different departments, and they put together this leadership program, incentive program, excuse me, and they launched it out to the general employee population, and it failed miserably. And one of the reasons that it failed, Anne Marie, because they neglected to ask the people that was going to impact the most. They did
mhm,
not survey the employees. They did not talk to the employees. They just came
mhm,
up with these concepts themselves. And so this is what I'm going to encourage, is for leaders to get to know your people to the best of your ability. Be able to identify what their strengths are, their areas of opportunities, if you will. Find out ways to collaborate. And as you do so, you can literally cater, if you will, to their need. Part of a leader responsibility, whether we're consciously aware of that or not, we are to serve our people.
mhm,
I think we have it flipped around that they are to serve us. I've learned that I can serve my employees in terms of removing barriers, roadblocks, challenges, being there for them in their times of crisis or needs as it pertains to the business, etc. And by doing so, removing those barriers and roadblocks, again, they typically go above and beyond. And so I think leaders are encouraged to be a little bit more present. But the
mhm,
challenge with that, with all due respect, is that most leaders I have the opportunity to engage with now are busier now than ever before. Their
mhm,
task, they have so many tasks among other tasks, and the trajectory looks even more daunting.
mhm,
So it's part of their responsibility to show up for their people, but because of retaining people, um, hiring people is an issue and a challenge right now globally. So all of this pressure is put on the leader and the people that remain, and it's kind of hard for them to show up for their people like they would like to. So that's a ongoing issue as well, and I think that we have to sort that out at the higher level to really see how we're going to take care of our leaders. Thus, our leaders can take care of our people.
yes. Well, as Nicole knows, that yesterday we had a talk with nurses that are focused on holistic nursing and coaching group from Canada. And it's all about really self-care for the nursing profession because they're losing so many people in the field, particularly after the pandemic. And when they were so, extended during that particular time. And so now there are more courses and more availability for people to start to learning techniques to, give self-care during this time so that you can be effective in the outer world, not and then also not bring it home, as you were saying, that people don't, they know how to make a true healthy balance, which is really what this book is about. And you also said something that you were mentioning about, that we all have sort of biases, or we call it prejudices, about the younger and the older. If they're younger, they perhaps, don't have the same work ethic, or, oh, the millennials, they don't file, or, they don't, respond to our emails when we want to, or whatever. And what I loved, I think it was in chapter 2, you did a whole beautiful piece on the unconscious bias, and how you mentioned that, particularly today, where we focus so much on the news of what we hear, it's usually around race related issues, but you say it extends to everything. We have, as you said on page 23, we have unconscious bias about the country or city in which a person was born, their religious beliefs, their social economic status, their parental status, their race, their ethnicity, their sexual preference, their clothing style, and pretty much anything else you can think of. And that holds court with every aspect, I think, of inter-exchange with everybody, when
Yes.
and can you give, our audience, our listeners, how you work with that, and how you work and with things with, confirmational bias,
Right.
how do you really change this when people come from real fundamental biases from all of our, existence with living in our cultural world?
I think in part is just understanding, number one, that we all have biases, right? Richard included. By all means, no one is exempt from that. Number one. Number two, biases do not have to be negative. It's how we make decisions, is help us make choices on what we want to do, how we want to do it, where we want to do it, and who we want to do it with. According, at least to my research, we even prefer people who look like us, sound like us, and share our same interests. So what I
Mhm,
encourage for folks to do, I often offer this challenge. I encourage folks to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so what I mean by that, if I prefer people who look like me, sound like me, share my same interests, one of the things I can do to be uncomfortable is to reach out to someone who doesn't look like me, sound like me, share my same interests, as a way to get to know them. But I also incorporate the components of emotional intelligence in that component. That way it helps me self-regulate. So my instinct may be to judge that book by its cover, or to place that person in a category if I see them visually, or if a statement in which they make. But if I'm able to listen objectively, I also call that active listening, listening to understand versus listening to reply. As I begin to listen to understand them and ask probing questions to understand their point of view, their perspective, and even understanding how do they get to that particular decision making or that choice in which they made, it helps me understand who they are. And
mhm,
then as I
mhm,
understand who they are, then I can begin to reconfirm, have some alignment conversations, or just respectfully disagree in our differences. But I do not
mhm,
have to add that negative connotation. I often hear people say, well, I just don't understand them. And so I've been hearing the word, they're crazy, they're stupid, they're
mhm,
idiots.
mhm,
And through my experience, Anne Marie, when we say things like that, we typically we it's true that we don't understand them, but
mhm,
why don't you understand them? Can you allow yourself to understand them? And these tools that I talk about in my book, particularly on the emotional intelligence component, gives me the blueprint, if I choose to begin to understand that person objectively.
mhm,
I don't have to
mhm,
call them crazy, stupid idiots, because we have a totally different belief system. That's we are entitled to that. But if I
mhm,
begin with that narrative, that it almost give that person the right to say the exact same thing. Well, you're an idiot,
mhm,
you're stupid. And now we're in this sort of combative space, which is not healthy for anyone. So
Mhm.
I've learned to be able to just meet people where they are. And as
Mhm.
I understand them, I realize that it may not be as bad or difficult or challenging as it seems. So these biases, we all have them. And I'm encouraging folks that first reaction that you might have, which is okay, convert that frustration, if you will, into what I call curiosity. It's a
Mhm.
softer emotion. So when I'm frustrated, I'm irritated, pissed off, you never know what might come out of my lips when I'm frustrated. But when I
Mhm.
convert frustration to curiosity, I begin again to give that person the benefit of the doubt. I begin to ask those why questions to understand your views, your perspectives, and that allows me to really have a conversation with you. And I
Mhm.
think that's an opportunity for us, especially in our differences, to just meet people where they are, withhold that judgment. I mean, many of us been told never judge a book by its cover, but what do? We judge a book by its
Right.
cover, right? It's part of our instinct, and that's okay. But do not get stuck there. Begin to become curious and ask those probing questions for understanding.
Yeah. Asking probing questions, going deep inside yourself to find, meaning with other people or connection, where you do meet, especially in a time with our political circumstances and in this, fraught, um, environment that we're definitely leading into. And also when people are watching TV or their videos or the mass media sorts with so much of the impact of sort of a negative approach, of an us versus them mentality. How, those things are very difficult to bring to the forefront unless you do have good mentorship in a work environment or in a school environment, where people are building team relationships, because so much of your book is about, like you said, you work with a lot of people who are athletes, and athletes have to work as a team, so you have to
Yes.
figure out who has their strengths, weaknesses, but no one is less than another or better than another. It's just pulling the team together as to where the right fits so that you can be an effective, complete force together, as one.
Right.
And that's always, that's about whether we look at a competitive value in our in the way we structure our educational system, or whether we bring it all together at large. It's funny because there's this new program recently on TV about called the American Experience, and it's about the Monopoly board and the history of Monopoly. And I recommend everybody to watch it because the impact of how Monopoly has played, particularly board games, in our educational system, of how it can shift us to be very competitive, the American way, or whether you can act as a team. And the original Monopoly board was really about acting as a community at one. And it wasn't about who can domain the whole board and get the highest property values. So please watch that. It's a plug for PBS and its program and that wonderful story on Monopoly. But I just think that this book has gotten it hits on it in so many layers that are so perfectly balanced, because you also have one on staying motivated. And I think that you mentioned, of course, people, getting their curiosity perked and starting them from understanding more about themselves and how they can be very similar to the other person. But how do you keep people motivated? How do you
Well,
really keep them, you know, together?
I think it starts with us as individuals. I think we all have a general sense in terms of what motivates us. And sometimes that can get uh, drowned out by just the components and the complexity of life. And so when I talk about motivation, I focus on two areas, the intrinsic and the extrinsic motivation. And the intrinsic motivation component is my internal why. Why do I do the things that I do in terms of the job that I choose, or my passion, my purpose, or whatever that might be? And I think it's important for everyone to have that internal why. And that internal why usually will help you sustain you, especially in those moments of difficulties of life, whether it's personal or professional. And so I think as a leader, it's okay to even ask that question, similar to the story I was sharing with you about the incentives in which the employees wanted. Well, as a leader, I often would ask my employees, what motivates you? Because part of the responsibility of the leader, quote unquote, is you're supposed to be a motivator, motivate your people. What I've learned about that sort of responsibility, we're all wired different, right? And so if my job is to be a motivator, what if I am not that type of leader? I'm more logical in my reasoning. It's about focusing on the goals and tasks, and that's so great. That's great. And so I coach leaders by encouraging them by asking that question of the employees. What motivates you? And if you ask that question, they will tell you. And then if you're able to accommodate their requests or needs or meet them halfway, you'll be amazed on how easy and simplistic it might be. The other component is the extrinsic motivation. That is more the value system as it pertains to dollars and cents. You know, that's the revenue that I am given based on the task that I'm responsible for. And so, you know, people are motivated by money, if you will, and other incentives, and that's fine. What I've learned through my experience, Anne Marie, there's a healthy balance of both. Especially in the arena of sales where I came from, I did know folks that were extremely money motivated. And often I would see another behavior that would come up shortly thereafter, and that was some form of manipulation, taking advantage, not being full disclosure of the client in terms of what they need. And this is one of the reasons, at least in my experience, where sales also has a negative connotation is. But if you're going to be in business, whether you're profit, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. If you're not generating revenue, you would soon to be out of business. So sales is essential for every business. But how those sales are conducted is really important. So money is okay to be motivated by that, but there's other components internally that need to be fed as well. Yeah, I think as a leader, by asking people just very simplistically, what is it that you want? What motivates you? What brings you here? What's your why? As they begin to communicate that to you, then you're able to, I guess, honor that request in some form of fashion if you're able to do so.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. And, you also have a wonderful chapter on fear. A lot of people don't want to discuss that and, and face it actually, because it's itself, very daunting at times. And can you give sort of an overview about what you talk about fear in your book?
Yes, I sum it up as there's two types of fear. I mean, I was taught as a kid, Richard, if you touch that stove while it's on, while it's hot, you're going to burn your hand. So that's one
Mhm,
type of fear, right? That fear is designed to keep us safe. The fear that I really focus on in my book is fear, and as I break down those letters, FEAR, that represents false evidence appearing real. False meaning that it's a fallacy. It really hasn't happened at all. However, the evidence appearing real, these are depictions or images that I create in my mind, imagining the worst case scenario. And so much so as I even begin to feel that emotion that if I take that risk or take that chance, even on myself, I think about what failure might feel like or the disappointment. And if I succumb to that fear or judgment or whatever case may be, I end up talking myself out of it, even though it may be for my betterment. And one of the things I share in the book, which is my experience, again, I talk about fear, but I still have to contend with the components and emotions of it. I was a mentor of mine by the name of Art Barter. He lives in Vista. He's one of the servant leaders. I met with him several years ago, and he actually inspired me or challenged me to write a book. And when he first made the suggestion that I should write a book, I said, no, thank you. I'm not
mhm,
interested at all whatsoever. And he said, Richard, if you're going to be serious about this business, especially as a coach, as a facilitator, trainer, speaker, that writing a book is really important. It gives you the authority figure based on your topics that you're focusing on. And so I thought about it, and within a few days, really, I received a LinkedIn request from a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Jones. And Jeremy owns a company called Jones Publishing located out of Phoenix. And his organization does is they help coaches, facilitators, trainers, speakers convert their message into a book. And so I spoke with Jeremy and his team, and I decided that, you know what, I'm ready to take on this task. And so I was really excited, pumped up, Anne Marie. I was ready to go out there and do this. And they have this very structured discipline program. And so one of my responsibilities were to submit the first 3 chapters of the book. And I did that. I submitted the first 3 chapters, and they were providing me feedback. So once I got the feedback, Anne Marie, I tell you, I've never seen so many red marks and corrections in all my life.
Yeah.
And it destroyed my ego. It destroyed my vision that I have for myself in terms of wanting to write this book. I saw this whole level of judgment, this criticism, and Anne Marie, I quit. I literally
Mhm.
quit. I said, I am not going to put myself out there. And that fear began to take over me. I just imagined worst case scenario that that book is getting released. My mom is going to disown me. My children are going to say, what in the heck is dad thinking about? My peer group, would not engage it, support it. And like, what the heck is this guy talking about? And I quit for about 6 months. And I was
Mhm.
sitting outside in my backyard, and I began to reflect on this opportunity. I was really pumped up. I was excited about the book. I got this negative feedback, and now I've quit. And then I asked myself some questions. And one of those questions was, well, Richard, what are you proving to yourself by quitting?
Mhm.
Well, I didn't like my internal response. Oh,
Mhm.
well, I'm a quitter. Oh, really? So when did that become, your anthem, if you will? And then the other thing, well, because it's hard. And my response was, well, life, if you just reflect on many of your experiences, life has been difficult and hard, and as
Mhm.
it is for many people in different form of fashion. And then it was about judgment, and then the fear of being ridiculed and letting people
Mhm.
down. And
Mhm.
so the next question was, well, what would you tell your children? What would you tell your clients? What would you
Mhm.
tell your peer group, the people that you're mentoring, that it's okay to quit? And then I got tired of talking to myself. I just like, Richard, get out of your head. And so a few days later, Anne Marie, I reached back out to my publisher, editor, and share with them, okay, I'm ready to get back on the program. And what I realized, Anne Marie, is that I had to learn a new skill.
Mhm.
I had not learned how to be a writer of a book. Again, speaking, training, I can do that all day, but converting that into a book and where it really feeds the mind of the reader wasn't a skill set of mine. And
Mhm.
so I had to learn something new. And for a moment, I didn't want to learn that either. So I
Mhm.
realized with Richard, if you want to get to this place in which you seek, then chances are is that you're going to have to learn new skills. So I began to discipline myself. I began to surround myself with those folks that I could mentor, that could mentor me in terms of writing and how to convert my message into a book. And fast forward, the book was released in May 17th of last year. And right out the gate, the book became a bestseller. It just
Yeah.
totally blew me away. It's just like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. and
Yeah.
and also, even before that, I received an endorsement on my book from Ken Blanchard. And Ken Blanchard is one of the legendary folks in my space. Ken, I think he's almost 90 years old, have written and co-authored about 80 different books, and many of his
Uh,
books have been converted into trainings. He's an international sort of a leader in this space. And he gave me this enduring endorsement of validation. And it almost
mhm.
brought, as a matter of fact, it actually brought tears to my eyes. I felt finally,
Mhm.
I made it, but more importantly, I'm so glad I did quit, but I
Mhm.
almost submit and gave in to that fear, and we wouldn't be here
Mhm.
talking if I would have done so. And
Mhm.
that's what I
Mhm.
realized is that life or the things that we seek, the things that we like to accomplish, at times is going to be hard,
Mhm.
and that's okay. And however, if we want to get to our desired outcome, if we're willing to go through some adversity, then we also have to face that fear. And fear can actually be your best friend if you allow it to stimulate you the right way, opposed to you talking yourself out of the things in which you seek versus going towards that uncertainty, if you will.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's so true because there are so many people that just don't do what they're really either meant to do or either that they're so gifted to do even, but they just won't do it out of that fear of those challenges. And it's also hard work. And it's also hard work to kind of face yourself and the fact that you did that. I think, like I said, the beauty of this book is not only that you put it together in such clarity and focus and simplicity, but you did, you know, you bring in everything about your own life. You are transparent in a day and age that people really want transparent. They want to know the person behind a book instead of somebody saying, well, you should do this and that, you know, if you want to be, you know, be successful, you know, in life.
Yes.
And that I think is what is the charm, specific charm of this book and why it's so appealing to so many people, because it just is it's a personal account, but then again it gives you so many tools that people can relate to and focus and such. But most of the I'd say common ground within the book is that you focus a lot on the fixed mindset, you know, and the growth mindset. And it's clear that you like the growth mindset, you know, and that's what
Yes.
you're instilling or trying to sort of give to the reader, that if you can loosen some of these fears or unconscious biases or you know, unconditional prejudices or whatever about yourself, even, you know, you can move into a sphere of really being your ultimate best. And then you can expect great things to happen in life, which is what's so wonderful. Maybe you can tell the audience too, what your course study coming up is going to be all about, because I know many people are interested in that.
Yes, our course study is called Conscious Leadership, and it was great working with Nicole and the team really birthing, you know, what these topics are. So RDM Management Group, my company, trained well on over 50 plus different topics. But as it pertains to conscious leadership, we really want to focus and pinpoint on some things to help people be a little bit more conscious, if you will, about their leadership. And that conscious leadership is about really a collective focus of your level of self-awareness and responsibility and sort of this team sort of synergy, if you will. And a conscious leader is someone that's very aware of these things and know how to lead people. They embrace those people skills, if you will. They understand that the way that we think, the way leaders get things done is through other people. But what's also as important, what impact am I having as a leader with my people? Many leaders I had the opportunity to replace, they misinterpreted intent from impact. And what I mean by that, their intentions was to lead them to meet the company goals and objectives, but how they led impacted those folks negatively. They were leading, do it because I say so. They didn't have respect, showing lack of trust, and people just typically don't respond favorably. They will do it because their job is at risk if they don't, if you will, but that also creates a issue with morale, apathy, lack of engagement, lack of focus, or even job security. And so we want to give leaders more of a blueprint, if you will, of understanding what conscious leadership is and how to use it. And the other component of that, I think, which makes it difficult depending on the organization which you represent, is, you know, back in my day, it was talking about, you know, leadership. Do you lead with the heart? Do you lead with your head? And sometimes leading with your heart would seem to be inferior or weak, if you will. We
Mhm.
were told that vulnerability was a sign of weakness, if you will. Now, I've learned that vulnerability is a sign of strength. Vulnerability is a human emotion, whether we subscribe to it or not. You can mask it, you can cover it up, but chances are, if you're not displaying vulnerability, it creates a separation. between you and your team. And there should be a healthy amount of vulnerability by all means. But as I begin to be vulnerable, as I am in my book, as a leader, I was vulnerable by just sharing my truth, being authentic with my folks. It actually creates engagement. It let that employee know that, you know, quote unquote, this term just really, you know, kicks me here, but it shows that I'm more human. But whether I'm acting with these skill sets or not, I am still human no matter what. Maybe I'm not practiced the best skills, if you will, to connect us. But these are my human characteristics show up no matter however I show up. I am still being human. My goal with these topics is to help us be a little bit more relatable. So we actually talk and dive into the components of emotional intelligence and really helping folks understand what the blueprint or the construct of emotional intelligence is. As a matter of fact, we all have emotional intelligence and we're all using it every day, whether we are consciously aware of it or not. My goal when we talk about this is to be a little bit more intentional about deploying these skill sets of emotional intelligence. And when we do so intentionally, that usually yield to better results. I also focus on psychological safety, actually what it means. You know, I learned that term ironically about 2.5 years ago, but I've been practicing it my entire leadership career. I just didn't know exactly what it meant. So this is to help folks understand what it is. And when you create an environment that is psychological safe, what that actually does for your team. And if you create an environment where psychological safety is at risk, the problems and the bottlenecks you are subject to be bearing witness to, but you don't realize that you are you as the leader is a common denominator in that sort of dysfunction of team development, if you will. We also focus on communication skills. Typically in the workplace, there are 5 dominant communication styles that are literally being used every day. They are aggressive, passive aggressive, manipulative, submissive, and assertive. And so we break down those 5 different communication styles in terms of defining what they are. But then more importantly, what are the behavior characteristics of these 5 different styles? And then number 3, how are those 5 different styles interpreted by the people that I'm serving and leading? That's the other challenge. Again, remember, we want to disentangle intent from impact. So my intentions is to tell this person what to do, but how I told them what to do, I just offended them, or I rubbed them the wrong way, or I said, well, they can't handle feedback. Well, maybe how I communicated that feedback is what really rubbed that person the wrong way. So there's a proper way of doing that. So the goal is to equip folks with those proper tools. And then finally, conflict management would be another area that we're going to be focusing on. And conflict is another one of those words that has a negative connotation. So going back to those 5 different communication styles, if I am submissive in my personality type, which also suggests that I avoid conflict. Well, often folks who avoid conflict, when the folks that avoid conflict don't often realize they often are causing conflict as well, because they're not speaking up for themselves. They're not being socially and emotionally expressive, or they're not communicating to the person, party, or group who they have an issue or a challenge with. However, what I've learned is that folks that are submissive, they still have those conversations, but it's not to the person, party, or group who is causing the challenge. That we have a conversation with their peer, their coworker, significant other. The problem with that is they're not solving the problem. You still have to be able to conjure up those communication skills to have that conversation to the other person, party, or group, and not imagining worst case scenario. That's that fear come again. Well, if I say this, I don't want to offend them. I don't want to hurt their feelings, or how do I say this? So the goal is to give folks the blueprint on how to do that and understand that if you're going to challenge the status quo, if you're going to get what you want, if you're going to improve things, conflict is inevitable, but it doesn't mean it has to be negative. Conflict, as a matter of fact, I encourage leaders to throw conflict into their team purposely to birth the best ideal. The pathway of creativity and innovation is found in conflict. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about, and then some, regarding the conscious leadership, and really learn how to leverage, you mentioned earlier, that growth mindset. That growth mindset is such a powerful tool if we're able to embrace that concept and begin to practice it. It's amazing on how we're able to perhaps see things differently, even though they're still difficult. But sometimes, through my experience, Anne Marie, if we can sometimes just change our perspective, even about our current situation, embrace it, see the benefits to it, see what I can learn, how can I grow, how can I even potentially change for the better, which is part of the growth mindset, you'll be amazed at how you navigate through those complexities will not take so much of a toll or stress on you. And these are not just concepts, and many folks don't know this, but my wife, Elisa, who I've been married to for 33 years now, she got diagnosed with Parkinson's about 3 years ago, and she went from this healthy, thriving individual, independent, strong woman to now she's almost completely bedridden. She can't walk around. She needs a wheelchair and a walker. We didn't see this coming, and it has impacted her literally from head to toe. As a matter of fact, my role has been literally converted to partner spouse to caregiver, 100%.
Yes.
And when that was happening in real time, because again, 3 years ago, she was just walking, thriving, doing great things. Now, again, 3 years later, it's not that at all. Again, spend most of the time in the bed. And dealing with every component and phase and stage of that was one of the most difficult things I had to do. In many of the cases, Anne Marie, I was constantly reacting, because there was no prediction in
Right.
the sort of the impact that Parkinson had on our body. It continued to take a toll. And so I'm constantly reacting, which created more frustration for Richard. Because if I can plan it, if I can strategize, I can handle it. But then again, it's another opportunity to change my perspective. Is life happening to me or is life happening for me? What are the benefits here? Because when I show up frustrated because I don't want to do this, I don't mentally, I don't feel like caregiving today. But guess what? I still need to show up. And if I'm stuck in that funk, if you will, in that mindset, it doesn't make the situation better. It actually makes it worse in my tone, how I react, how I engage with her. And I realized that, Richard, you have some say-so in this as well. And part of that is changing your mindset, embracing this. What can you learn from this? How can I grow? How can I change? And that's when the growth mindset wasn't so much fun, because now I have to apply this concept to my life. And so I'm sharing this with folks because I'm not just sharing these concepts with you and say, hey, this is just a great thing to do. Try it. I'm living this. And my goal is to be completely transparent, to share how I use it. I have my good moments and I have my bad moments. And notice I said moments, right?
Yeah.
I didn't say a bad day. I have my moments. Because if I'm having a bad day, chances are I'm holding on to that emotional baggage longer than what I need to. I've learned how to relinquish that, whether it's some meditation, whether it's spiritual, whether it's praying, whether it's reading something. I find ways to navigate through those complexities and not stay in that mental sort of difficult state of mind, which we are entitled to. But I just realized that doesn't work well for me or anyone else that I interact with.
Right. Yeah. But the fact is that you also need to recognize that your needs have to be met through this journey as well. And, and you have to, it's all about also self-caring for yourself through very difficult and challenging times, which many people are facing. And it seems to be more apparent, more and more today. This is just an amazing piece of work. I think that, I encourage everybody, if they can, to definitely take this course. In fact, I may even be signing up for it. I think it enables people to see many perspectives of your life. And but most of all, it really, I think, helps people listen, and communicate better, and with all those very tools, I think that would be basically half the challenge that we all face today on so many levels, to be a better listener, a better communicator, and also to really understand that you have to have an open heart you know, through your day-to-day life on many aspects, and that we can change how we lead through that as well, through the heart rather than being through the head and such.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Richard, for this wonderful, you know, talk today. And I think what we'll do is, Nicole, shall we have you come on and give a little bit of explanation of when the course will happen, and then also maybe open the floor up to other people who would like to ask questions.
Yes, definitely. Thank you both for that really enlightening last hour. I really enjoyed getting to know Richard a little bit better and his book a little bit better, as well as all of the information that he's going to be presenting to us in a couple weeks. And as you guys can tell from our presentation, Richard is a dynamic presenter, but also so genuine and real. And thank you, Richard, for sharing your personal story. I mean, that's so important to just connect, and you are definitely practicing what you are preaching, and living what you are teaching, and you can tell that you're genuinely sharing it from your heart and from your life experience. And I think that that's what makes the audience or your students or the participants in any of your programs really connect with you and with your story, because we all have something, right? I mean, even just this morning when we logged on to begin, Richard took the moment to really connect and say, how are you doing? Right. And I think that that is one of the most important things that we can do for each other, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's, you know, connecting with somebody who serves you your coffee in the morning. Right. I mean, once we can all connect in that way, the world becomes a better place, and we're able to communicate better and from a place of genuine concern and compassion for each other. So thank you, Richard.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So Richard's course, Conscious Leadership, begins Friday, March 10th and continues for 3 Fridays, the 17th and the 24th. It's going to be 9 a.m. Pacific time, but it will also be recorded. So if that time doesn't work for you and you'd still like to participate, recordings are available. We also wanted to extend a $25 discount to anybody who watches this webinar and would like to sign up. And when I send out the recording to this, I will also send the registration link to it as well. And then we'll be active within the next couple weeks on our social media accounts. You can follow Richard, you can follow CIHS to get more information. You can also visit the CIH website at cihs.edu. All of the information is there, and the registration link is there as well. So yes, we are looking forward to it. And I hope you, Anne-Marie, can join us, and perhaps even Dr. Brophy can join us, or some of our CIHS leadership. I think we would all benefit from all of the topics that are going to be discussed, especially that growth mindset. I really love that. And I love not having a bad day, but having a bad moment. That really resonated with me, to kind of shift perspective a little bit and take it moment by moment.
Yes. Yeah, I've learned to take some deep breaths lately. But I like what you said, Anne-Marie. Again, I most definitely allow myself to feel these emotions, but more importantly, I've learned how to take care of Richard. And because in this, you know, constant pull, if I can't take care of myself, it's hard for me to show up for others. And that even comes in the territory of facilitating training and coaching. So I have my time that I carve out. I call it Richard time, and I most definitely do that. But I also find that a lot of leaders right now, are not taking time out for themselves. And that's a concern for me as well. And so I'm just going to encourage everyone, not just leaders, but in general, take out time for yourself. Make sure you take care of you, mental, physically, and that allow you to be showcase your skills and talents, and hopefully show up for other people as well.
So important.
Beautiful. Indeed. Very important. Wonderful. Do we have any questions from the audience?
It does not look like we do at this time.
Just a comment. Thank you, Richard. I really appreciated it very much. And it makes me look forward to your course very much. And what you said just now resonates with me, and I think what's needed in leadership generally. I was at a meeting last month of college presidents, and they were talking about how to survive that kind of a job, and one of the really central things they talked about was the critical need for self-care, like you were just talking about. And so I think what you're doing is really wonderful. And I've been talking with leaders in our local community who said that they use your coaching to help them. And so I'm really looking forward to your course coming up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap things up for today. This recording will be available within a few days. And if you have any questions about the course, you can email me at nicole_ryle@cihs.edu. And any questions you may have for Richard, I can forward them over to him. And we look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks, Richard, and look forward to your course at CIHS Enlighten. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Expect great things to happen.
Yes.
Indeed.
Thank you. And thank you, Anne-Marie, for your
Oh,
great leadership.
it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much,
Okay.
Richard. See you soon.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you. Great questions, by the way. Thank you,
Oh,
Anne-Marie.
good. Well, I enjoyed it very much. See you then.
Okay,
Thank you,
take
everyone.
care.
Oh, and go out and buy Richard's book.
Yes,
That's great things to
absolutely.
happen.
There we go.
All right.
There we
Take
go.
care, everybody. There it is.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Take
Bye-bye.
good care. Bye-bye.